Blessings to you all again. Sorry I had to cut it off. But I'm gonna try to get everything squared away this time. So I was mentioning that that in the Yahweh text, because the Yahweh text only consists um, of Genesis chapter 2 on down. Last time we talked about the connection between the Cain and the Kenites, and so
This man. No, not that one.
what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yours. Um, yeah, it's happening now. Let's see. What chapters will I be focusing on? Today I'll be focusing on the flood today. Last week we talked about the connection between Cain and the Kenites, um, and that the Kenites established their worship as coming from Adam, and Adam and Eve, because they're the parents of Cain. Um, I also notice that there's no mention of the Sabbath, of the seventh day Sabbath in Genesis chapter 2, starting at verse 4, um, all the way to the end of verse of chapter 2. And so the question is, what is the seventh day Sabbath still valid? And that's a really good question. What we see is that Yahwehism, we see the possibility that Yahwehism may not have been established to revolve on a certain day, but the concept of Yahwehism, as I've been learning within the last week, is that we know from Christianity about salvation and holiness and sanctification, um, that these are things that supposedly bring us closer to Yahweh. Christianity believes in faith through grace, which basically says if you have faith that Jesus died on the cross and that he rose again, that he's seated on the right hand of the Father, then you are saved. In in Yahwehism, there wasn't that concept of being saved. There was the concept of worship. And worship is not what we think it is. It's not about the songs. It's not about, lifting your hands. That's not worship. Worship means that you are submitted. It means that you're physically bowed and mentally submitted to whatever it is that Yahweh teaches is his worship. And that's the purpose of the Yahweh text, is to show us what worship to Yahweh is, what submission to Yahweh is. And so that we see that um, Cain worshipped Yahweh, and because Cain worshipped Yahweh, even though he had committed what we consider a sin, Yahweh still um, Yahweh still protected him. So Yahweh gave him a mark on his forehead, and it was most likely the letter Chet. And we know that the Shazu also had the Shazu had a mark on their foreheads also, and that mark is the same mark that Moses showed the people of Israel when they were coming out of Egypt, when he told them to mark the doorposts of their house. If you look at the doorpost of your house, it automatically looks like the Hebrew letter Het. Okay, so we can see that Het may have been the symbol that was on their foreheads. So I want to go back to Genesis chapter 4, And we're going to go to verse 16. It says, and Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built the city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So, um, so Cain built a city, and this is something that's important because when you go later into the Torah, we see that Moses commands the people. Commands. You know, I like to use my finger quotations. Commands. Yahweh commands Moses 2 times. We're going to go to Numbers. We'll go to Numbers. Numbers. Numbers chapter 35. It says, and Yahweh spoke unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, command the children of Israel that they give unto the Levites of the inheritance of their possession cities to dwell in. And ye shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities round about them. So what this command, Moses is commanding the people of Israel, is that they give cities to the Levites so that the Levites can live in them. Now, if you go skip down to verse 6, you'll see that there's a direct repetition. But instead of repeating it and saying, oh, these cities are for the Levites, now these are cities of refuge. It says, and among the cities which you give unto the Levites, there shall be 6 cities of refuge, which you shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee there, and to them you shall add 42 cities. So there's this concept of cities of refuge. I want to help you make the correlation that Cain built a city, and the purpose of the city was what? To protect himself. Okay, it was a city of refuge. It was to protect. It was a place. When you talk about building a city is different than a town, and it's different than a field. It has walls all around. So he built a place where he was protected, and it was a city of refuge. So we see where the cities of refuge come from. This is a Yahweh text type thing, because when you understand that the Kenites had their own cities, they had their own places where they worshiped Yahweh. They didn't have a tabernacle, they just had cities, and the cities were set for worship. So that was a good observation to me. Another observation that you will make is that Cain had a son named Enoch. Enoch had a son named Irad in verse 18, and Irad had Mahujael. Mahujael had Methuselah, and Methuselah had Lamech. Now, notice right away that Enoch is parallel to the sons of Seth. Seth also had a son named Enosh, and later had a son named Enoch. And then there's Methuselah, there's Methushael, and then there's Lamech. So you see that there's a repetition here, meaning that there are competing texts here, and they're repeating. They the stories are the same, but the details are different. And so there are 2 competing traditions with the same sort of details. Now, um, you would understand that the Kenites don't really care about, um, you know, genealogy. They believe that they come from Cain. The Kenites are the people of Cain, or the children of Cain, and they get their worship from the children of Cain. They don't really care about Seth. I believe Seth may have been an addition that was later added. But you notice that in verse 18 it says, and unto Enoch was born Iran, and Irad begat Methujael. Methu Mehu I'm sorry, Mehujael. I'm gonna look this up in Blue Letter Bible. Mehujael. This is verse 18. Notice that at the end of his name is what? El. So there may be there is a competing tradition, and that tradition may be El. Okay, so it's Mehu Yael, and then Mehu Yael has Methu Shael. Methu Shael is very similar to Methuselah. Mehu Yael. Okay, so El is the point there. It's El, it's El, it's El, it's El. So this is coming from El worship. Okay, this is coming from the El tradition. You can tell which texts have, because of the names. You know, if it's a Yahweh text, or if that person is from the Yahweh tradition, you will always see Yeho at the beginning of the name, or Yah or Yahu at the end of the name. Okay. So, but if it's L, you will see L at the end of the name or L at the beginning of the name. Okay. And so that's a good way for you to understand. Now, what about Elijah? Elijah is Eli Yahu. So it has Eli and Yahu also. El and Yah. So it has both of them. So how do you explain that? Well, we're going to talk about this later, that there was a time when the Yahweh text was combined with the El text. And we call that the JE tradition. Most of the historical texts like Samuel and Judges were made during that JE period of time. Um, so we'll talk about that another time. But okay, so that's very important. And then at the end, it mentions Seth. And let's see, Seth, and to him also was born a son, and his name was Enosh. So Enosh and Enoch is basically the same. The Seth tradition is longer, so that's worth mentioning and looking at. But we're gonna get to, I think that was it. I think that was everything that I had from last week. So we're gonna get to the text from this week, and we're gonna go to Genesis chapter 6. Now, you can understand that Genesis chapter 5 is not there. Why? Because Genesis chapter 5 is a genealogy of the children of Seth. Okay, and so whether it's an L text or a priestly text, we have to really examine that, because the name El is mentioned, and um, that's kind of a touchy thing. But um, the the um, the Yahweh text is not concerned about the children of Seth, because there's Cain. You know, the Kenites came from Cain. They don't really care about the children of Seth. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 6. We're going to skip and talk about the flood. So we skip chapter 5, we get to chapter 6, and then chapter 6 we skip verses 1 through 4, and we go to verse 5. It says, and Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the hearts and thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And he repented, um, and it, and Yahweh regretted that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And Yahweh said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creeping thing, and fowl of the air, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh. So verses 5 through 8, chapter 6, verses 5 through 8, is an introduction to why the flood happened. Then you skip down to chapter 7, starting at verse 1. It says, and Yahweh said to Noah, come you and all your house into the ark, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast you shall take to you 7 and 7, each with his mate, and of the beasts that are not clean, 2 and 2, which was um, with each with his mate. Stop right there. So in the text, in the actual text, the expanded version, there's 2 times where Yahweh tells Noah to come into the ark and to bring animals. One time he says 7 clean, 7 and 7 clean, with 7 male and 7 female clean, and 2 and 2 of unclean. Well, there's another place where it just says 2 and 2. And so you see that there are contradicting traditions, and the contradicting tradition is the priestly source. The priestly source has its own, gets its own stories from a whole different source. Okay, but in the Yahweh version, he says 7 of every clean animal, and 2 of every unclean animal. And verse 3, chapter 7, verse 3, it says, of the fowls of the air, 7 and 7, male and female, to keep seed alive upon the face of the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, do you guys see the 7 there? So we're talking about the Sabbath. I mentioned about the Sabbath earlier. Do you see the 7s? The pattern of 7s are still there, okay, even in the Yahweh text. So for yet 7 days, I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So here we have 40s too. And every living substance that I have made will I blot out from under the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that that Yahweh commanded him. So chapter 7, verse 7. And Noah went in, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. So it doesn't say that they went in there before the flood started. It says that they went in because of the flood. So it was starting to get a little bit wet, and they said, well, maybe we need to go inside. We need to, get inside somewhere. And it came to pass after the 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now there's another, the priestly text says 120 days. So you see that there's conflicting information, and when you see there's conflicting information, you have to see that there's conflicting traditions there. Okay. So verse 16, it says, and Yahweh shut him in the ark, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bore up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. and the waters prevailed, verse 18, and increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark went upon the face of the waters. Verse 19, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high mountains that were under the whole heaven were covered. So the mountains were covered um, by the flood. Now, think about this very well. The question is, if the flood was worldwide, how is it that the children of Cain were able to survive? How is it that the children of Cain were able to survive? Think about that for a minute. Scientifically speaking, the flood was not all around the world, it was just in certain parts of the Middle East. So when we're talking about the whole world, because it says it covered every high mountain, there's first of all, these people who are writing this text were not at the flood. Okay, they weren't there. They're telling the story thousands and thousands of years afterwards, and we have to keep that in mind. That this is not a testimony. They're not testifying that they're not testifying that oh yeah, I saw it, and yeah, it's real. They weren't there. They don't have the right to testify. They're just saying the story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So verse 20, 15 cubits upon upward that the waters prevailed, and the mountains were covered. All in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, whatsoever was in the dry land died. And he blotted out every living substance which is upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and creeping thing, and fowl of the heaven, and they were blotted out from the earth, and Noah only was left, and they that were with him in the ark. So now we skip to chapter 8. We go to verse 3. It says, then the rain ceased to fall on the earth. Verse 6, and it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the earth. But the dove found no rest for the soles of her feet, and she returned unto him to the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. And he put forth his hand and took her and brought her in unto him in the ark. Okay.
Are you reading the comments?
Yeah. Gilgamesh. That's interesting. In the Hindu text, what is it? Upanishad?
What?
You know what that is? It's a Hindu text called the Upanishad.
Upanishad.
Or the Utpanishadam, something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it. If you can write a pronunciation for me, that'll be awesome. But in it says that who was told? Okay, from some research on Gilgamesh. It's told. Oh, okay. Upanishadam. Upanishadam. It's from the Gilgamesh text. He's told to build a wall. Is that what a barrage is? It's like a bridge or something like that. I still messed it up. Dang. Yeah, I probably totally butchered that word. A barrage, and to take samples of living creatures with him to save them. So different cultures have a flood story. So yeah, and that's interesting too. Each of the cultures have a flood story.
Mm-hmm.
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
China has one. The Hindus have one. Yeah, and Gilgamesh is 2,300 years older than the Bible, in the Bible
Gilgamesh
text.
means Venezuela.
No, Gilgamesh is, where does the Gilgamesh text come from? I believe it comes from the Greeks, the Sumerians.
Sumerians. Okay.
So that's a Babylonian text. So we can see um, that there's something going on there. I want to skip to chapter 8, verse 20. It says, And Noah built an ark unto Yahweh, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Okay, so that's plainly not a Yahweh text. That's a priestly text. It's talking about a it's talking about a what you call it? It's talking about a sacrifice and a specific type of sacrifice. Okay. And so Yahweh text, I'm going to skip down to Genesis chapter. Uh, okay, we're going to stay in 9 for a minute. No, we're not. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 10. What I have here is not the updated version. And it talks about, oh, sorry, I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 8. It said, talks about the sons of Noah, that Japheth, Shem, and Japheth, Shem, and Ham were the descendants of the of Noah, and they populated the Middle East.
So Shem knows about the Yahweh text.
I don't know. The Yahweh text was not written then. The
No,
Yahweh text,
about Yahweh.
I don't know. I don't think he did, because remember that I don't know. It doesn't tell us about what the children of Shem did.
Because you told that he is the Melchizedek. Yeah.
Yeah, that's later though.
Okay.
Um, so Genesis chapter 11. I'm sorry, Genesis chapter 10, verse 8. And Cush begat Nimrod, and he defiled himself to be mighty in the earth. Okay, so this is an interesting text. What is this? Genesis chapter 10 and verse 8. Let me find it in my handy dandy blue letter Bible. Chapter 10. It says, In Cush begat Nimrod, he began to be a mighty one in the earth. When you look in the Hebrew text of Genesis chapter 10, verse 8, it says that Cush begat Nimrod, and that Nimrod defiled himself so that he could be a mighty one on the earth, so that he could be mighty on the earth. What does it mean that he defiled himself? He profaned himself, and he profaned the name of Yahweh. So in verse 9, it says he was a mighty hunter before Yahweh. And the Hebrew doesn't say before Yahweh. It says that he was a mighty hunter. Yes, I didn't put that in there. In the face of Yahweh. So that means that he opposed Yahweh. When you say, when Exodus chapter 20 says, you should have no gods before me, it says in my face. And it basically means in opposition.
Mm-hmm.
So when something is in your face, that means that they're opposed to you. Okay. So so Nimrod opposed Yahweh. Um, Therefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the
So
mighty hunter who opposed
you know
Yahweh.
about the Yahweh. Nimrod.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But Nimrod profaned himself, and this may mean that he introduced the worship of other gods, the worship of the sun, the moon, and all those things. Now, historically speaking, they found evidence of Nimrod and his wife that that Nimrod taught the people how to worship the sun and the moon and the stars, and that Nimrod is the origin of the naming of the days: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so it comes to show that Nimrod thought that the sun was very important. So of course, the first day of the week is Sunday. But still, we don't see a mention here of the seventh day. Okay. Um, in verse 10, it says, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Ahad and Calne in the land of Shinar. And out of that land went forth Asher and built Nineveh and the city of Rehoboth and Calah. Um, and so this is a context for us for Genesis chapter 11. It says, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. How interesting is this? Think about this for a minute. That it talks about Nimrod in chapter 10, and it talks about them finding um, a finding a plain in the land of Shinar that they dwelt in. So Nimrod and the land of Shinar have something in common here. There's something, that they have in common. It says, and they said to one another, "Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. And Yahweh said, "Behold, the people are one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do." Verse 7 is important. Come, let us. Again, who is this us? Who is this us that Yahweh is speaking to? Well,
it's a big question for everybody.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a really big question because everybody wants to know who us is. And if you understand that the Bible was not written as a whole, but it was written in parts, and that the Yahweh text and the El text were all polytheistic, you would understand that the gods are talking to each other. Okay, but apparently Yahweh is leading the gods, which is a pattern of the JE version, the JE text. Okay, the text that combines the Yahweh version and the El version. When you understand that in their book, Yahweh has a pantheon of gods, and Yahweh is the Most High, then you understand why Yahweh is leading the gods into this thing. Okay. And then the rest of Genesis chapter 11 talks about Shem and his descendants. Basically, it talks about Abram. And when you get down to chapter 11, verse, we'll start at 24. It says, and Nahor, let me go back. Yeah. And Nahor lived 9 and 20 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. All right. So Terah is the father of Abram, Nahor and Haran. Okay. Verse 27. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran, and Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father. Terah. Okay, I think I might skip something. Nope, apparently not. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren; she had no children. Look at verse 31. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, or his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees. Why is that important? Why is that worth noting? Because when we speak of Abram or Abraham, in chapter 12, Yahweh speaks to Abram and tells Abram to leave the land of his nativity. But already in Genesis chapter 11, it's established that Abraham's father had decided to leave and that he left the land of his nativity. So Abram was not living with his family. He was living still with his father's house. Okay? So that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, she's not here. You heard me like that? Want you to do that? Yeah, I know what she.
Hey,
How you doing?
she actually went to go on. Oh, she went to pick up my nephew and Gary.
You got to be kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. How long has she been gone?
She's been gone for at least like an hour.
She didn't even tell me she wasn't here when I called her. Oh my God, I am so hungry. I got to go find me something to eat. Okay, thank you. How you doing?
Good. She's
Can
doing
you
good.
get
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't lock my door because I just knew. I can't believe her. I was just talking to her. She said she wasn't home.
She's probably on her way back though. Really, Andre? Collect. Really? So we are. Hold on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
me some meat because I'm starting.
Well, I thought she was going to be back every time.
Yeah, I did too. Because when I called, she said she was down. Well, yeah, I'm back at home. I said, we had your way now. She was like, okay. I took that. So these, this right here, this killer. It's kind of like wool like that. So her skin is so soft and delicate. It comes like a good skin. You know, if you grab up one of those big ones, so you should, I was trying to take over there, and I didn't put the soft part down on it, it was like, that's not a trade. Okay, you're welcome. Come in, take, grab somebody else baby. Yeah, right. I don't know, okay, we'll sit in my car and call to see what she at, and, if she's not, I guess we're gonna go get me a hamburger or something.
Okay, all right.
See you all day.
I'll see you.
Okay.
All right, y'all. I'm back. I know we need to insert a commercial. Sorry. So we see that Abram. Maybe I should stop here and then just take over with Abraham later, because Abraham enters into when we start talking about Abram, we enter into the L text. So I think we're gonna end here. So many interruptions today. But thank you guys for being patient, and we'll start off here in Genesis chapter 11. Okay, so blessings to you. Thank you all for watching. I'm trying to see the later comments. Oh, let me close this. Blessings.
Oh, she wants